I had just turned 35. I was a lawyer, and although music was my passion, I was about to throw in the towel. I had trained for many years to be a good tenor, but the opportunity never came. And there I was, one more day, waiting at the phone. I had spent weeks waiting for a call to confirm if I could finally accompany the great Zucchero artist on tour, so that I could sing with him and be known by a large audience. But the phone never rang.
Welcome to the Trembol video podcast, the place for music stories that thrill.
Hello, my name is Andrea Bocelli, I'm blind, and I almost wasn't born. I know it sounds a bit like one of those introductions in an Alcoholics Anonymous type of support group. But now you'll understand, because I'm really something. I'm going to tell you a brief story. A young pregnant wife is admitted to a hospital in Tuscany, Italy. The doctors tell her that she has an attack of appendicitis and treat her. She gets better, but in the end the doctors suggest that she abort the child because it could be born with a disability. But the woman is brave and decides to go ahead. As you can imagine, the young woman was my mother, and so I, Andrea, came into the world on September 22nd, 1958. When I was born, I was not completely blind, although the doctors were somewhat right, and what I had was congenital glaucoma, or in other words, I could see very little, and almost everything was blurry. But that didn't stop me from being very happy in the small village in Tuscany, Italy, where I was born. It's called Laiatico, no more than 1,000 people live there, and it's in the Pisa area, so I'm a village boy. My mother used to tell me that when I was only 3 years old, I was being treated for my eyesight in a hospital, and there was no way to calm me down. I cried and cried until suddenly I heard in a nearby room an opera that another patient had put on. I immediately calmed down, and my mother understood the power that music would have on me. She soon bought a record player and speakers and many vinyl records with operas on them. By the time I was 9 years old, I knew them all. In fact, every time a friend of my parents came over, they would ask me to sing, and I would always choose the same one, the Andrea Charnier opera. As I was telling you, we lived in the countryside in Tuscany. My parents were selling farm equipment, and I remember that I loved life there. My family was very religious, just as I am now. Every Sunday we went to Mass. The best part was when it was over, and the pastor would let me play the organ a little bit. I didn't know how to play yet, but somehow or other I was able to find the notes and create melodies. My house was a happy place. My parents lived in harmony, and that is what my brother and I breathed. So it was very difficult for them to make the decision to send me to a school far away from home. But it was necessary because that was the only place adapted for visually impaired and blind children, and it was just what I needed. I was 7 years old, and I'll be honest, it was a little hard because I could only go home 3 or 4 times a year, and the school was a little cold at first. But I ended up adapting, and where I liked to be was in the choir. I excelled enormously there, so my parents decided that I should also begin to study piano. Later I would learn the flute and saxophone, and today I can play the trumpet, guitar, percussion, trombone, accordion. I am what you would call a one-man band. One day I was playing a soccer game in the playground with my friends from school. and the ball hit me in the eyes. That caused a hemorrhage that, according to the doctors, accelerated my blindness until I became completely blind. Probably without the hit I would also have lost my sight completely, but who knows? It was very difficult for me, but I still had music as a support, and with willpower and the push of my family I kept going. When I was 12 years old, I returned home, and my grandfather gave me a tiny horse to celebrate. I started riding and felt a special connection with the animal. From then on, I kept asking for bigger and stronger horses, and it became one of my passions. Even today, it is still one of my biggest hobbies, and I ride whenever I can. It was the year 1972. I had just turned 14 and won my first Young Talent contest. I remember it as if it were today. It was at the Grand Margarita Cafe. At first, I didn't want to participate, but my family, my mother, and my uncle insisted a lot, and I decided to sing my grandfather's favorite song. Oh, Campanola Bella. Oh, beautiful countryside. I won the competition, but don't think that would bring me any success. In my family, there was no musical tradition. We didn't know anyone in the music world. And to make matters worse, when I reached puberty, my voice changed. For a while, I even lost it. I was not able to sing. Little by little, I recovered it, but I had also lost my confidence. So despite continuing part-time playing and singing in bars and clubs, I focused on my studies. Time went by, and I was already in my 20s. With the money I earned at the piano bar, I took singing lessons and kept trying to find a path in music. Although from time to time I got very harsh criticism, like the one from a producer who saw me in a cabaret where I was playing and told me, "You will never in your fucking life be a singer." Or the music critic who shouted at me, "I don't think you have the slightest talent to sing opera." But the violence of those criticisms didn't manage to upset me. I have never let myself be conditioned by the outside, and that at some point would pay off. I had the good fortune to meet the great Maestro Betterini, who would become my instructor. When he heard me for the first time, he told me that I would become a great tenor, and I answered him not to joke, that it was something very important to me. But it wasn't a joke. He really meant it and instructed me to become one. I was convinced to go ahead in music, but my father didn't think it was right. He wanted me to study for a career because he feared I couldn't make a living from singing. I came up with the idea of writing him a letter to convince him. The letter said, "Dear Father, it is useless to argue because we will never agree. I suppose it is normal because of the 30 years that separate us. Or maybe you are afraid of not finding the courage to stay by my side in spite of everything. Don't worry, listen to me. I'm sure I'll face any difficulty and overcome it. Nothing will frighten me, and nothing will corrupt me. Nothing in this world will make me forget that I can do it, and that I can do it on my own." What do you think? Did it work? No, it didn't. He cried when he read it, but he kept on going, and in the end he convinced me to study a career. So at 27 years old, I enrolled in law. The truth is that I really like it, and I even got a doctorate in it. I started working as a lawyer for a while, but life had another destiny in mind for me. One day I discovered that my greatest idol, the tenor and maestro Franco Corelli, was auditioning voice students for a masterclass in Turin, Italy. Of course, I couldn't miss that opportunity. He is one of the reasons I loved music. So I went, sang for him, and when I finished, he came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You have a very nice voice." Yahoo! Yahoo! He took me under his protection and taught me what the music of silence was. Do you want me to tell you the big secret? It is nothing other than to remain silent in order to take care of your voice for as long as possible. I liked the term so much that in my 40s, when I wrote my autobiography, I called it just that, The Music of Silence. There was even a movie made of the book with the same name. But don't think that this singing in silence was easy. I, like any other young man, went out partying, had my drinks, sometimes smoked. Well, I had to give it all up. Because as he taught me, it was affecting my vocal cords. Today I have a vineyard and I enjoy wine very much, but always in moderation.
Me gustan las mujeres, me gusta el vino.
In 1992, at the age of 34, I married my longtime girlfriend, Enrica Sensati. I met her when I was playing the piano in Pisa, and with her I had my first children, Amos and Matteo Bocelli. But life takes many turns, and we would end up divorcing in the year 2002. Going back to that 1992, the Italian rock star Zucchero, you know, the one who sings,
Under the moonlight.
Zucchero had composed a song called Miserere, Mercy, together with Bono from U2. Zucchero wanted Luciano Pavarotti to sing it with him, and to convince him he decided to look for another tenor and record a demo to show it to Pavarotti. I applied for the casting and was lucky enough to be selected. Over the years, Zucchero told me that when Pavarotti heard the demo, he said, "Who is the one who sings? You don't need me anymore, I couldn't do better than him." Pavarotti would go on to record Miserere with Zucchero to spectacular success, but of course I was not in the equation. It was a very complicated period for me, with a lot of uncertainty. Being able to record that demo was a small success, but of course the opportunity ended there. One day I was told that Zucchero was going on tour and that I could have the opportunity to sing it in concert with him. So I waited day after day for the label to call me and confirm if that was really going to happen, but that day never came. And I had to go on with my life as a lawyer. I remember spending a lot of time by the phone waiting for a call. It took forever, but finally the phone rang. Zucchero was inviting me to sing with him at a concert. It was going to be my first time in front of a big audience. I was super nervous, but everything went well. It was a great success. I even accompanied Zucchero later on his European tour singing Miserere. Among the audience was Caterina Caselli, the president of the Sugar music label. She fell in love with my voice, and the following year, in 1993, at the age of 35, I signed my first record contract. I already had the contract, but I had to make myself better known yet. The perfect platform was the most prestigious Italian music festival known worldwide, Sanremo. It was in 1994 that I entered and won with the highest score to date singing Il Mare Calmo della Sera, the calm sea of the evening. When I returned to my hometown, I was welcomed as a hero. But not only there, suddenly all over Italy I became an idol. So much so that Luciano Pavarotti invited me to sing with him in the second edition of his famous Pavarotti and Friends. That was the beginning of a friendship that lasted forever.
Thank you for being a friend.
In 1994, I finally released my first album. On it, I included two wonderful versions of songs I love. Caruso, and El Luce alla Stella and the Stars Shone. The latter, as you know, belongs to Puccini's opera Tosca. The album was a hit all over Italy, but still nobody knew me outside my country. Until my second album, Bocelli, arrived, and I had the chance to sing on television one of the songs, Te Partirò, I Go With You, which you may be more familiar with in its English version, Time to Say Goodbye. And that I was lucky enough to sing with the great Sarah Brightman for my third album, Viaggio Italiano, Italian Trip. Here's a little piece, see if it rings a bell. It turns out that a world heavyweight boxing champion, Henry Mask, saw my performance on TV and immediately called the label to ask me to sing the song in his last fight. He lost the fight, but the song was heard halfway around the world, which made my popularity skyrocket. By the way, the album Viaggio Italiano also includes one of my most popular songs in Spanish, Vivo per lei, I Live for Her, which although it was not very successful at first, when I sang it as a duet in Spanish with singer Marta Sanchez, it became a classic. It was time to release my first international album, Romanza. It sold over 16 million copies worldwide, but I still felt something was missing. You know what it was? Opera. My dream since I was a child had not yet been fulfilled, until in 1998, at the age of 40, I had the opportunity to sing Puccini's La Bohème, the dream of my life. It was in the Lyric Theatre of Cagliari in Italy. I remember that I studied every inch of the stage and every second of the work to make it perfect. You know that my true passion is opera and classical music, and that was the moment to show it. The performance was very well received by the audience and the director, who said it was the best in many years in my role, that of Rodolfo. This opened the door for me to perform more operas live and to be able to record them on albums, as I would do with Tosca and Requiem by Verdi and Puccini's own Bohème, this time conducted by the great maestro Zubin Mehta. I will always be grateful to him, because he always praised me, saying that he knew almost no one who had absolute control from forte, the highest, to pianissimo, the lowest, in any note, and that my voice range of 3 octaves exceeded that of any lyric tenor.
A tenor is a singer whose tessitura lies between that of the countertenor and the baritone. The lyric tenor possesses the facility to move in the higher notes and the lightness that allows for flowery ornamentation and lively phrasing.
By the way, as a curiosity, and to my great surprise, in the year 99 I was named one of the 50 most beautiful people in the world by People magazine. I don't know, I don't see anything when I look in the mirror, but if they say so, that would be a great year, because I also became the first classical artist to be nominated for a Grammy for Best New Artist. I was 41 years old, but who cares, right? The decade of the 2000s was really crazy for me, starting that same year when I released my album Sacred Arias, which would be the best-selling classical album by a solo artist in history, and with which I would go on tour all over the world. That same year, I was offered to record the song for the soundtrack of an animated film called The Quest for Camelot, The Magic Sword, with the great Celine Dion. To introduce me, Celine said the nicest words ever said about me, that if God sang, I'm sure I would sound like me. Of course, I don't believe that, far from it, but it's an incredible compliment, isn't it? The song was a mega hit, and I'm sure you've heard it before, The Prayer.
Let this be our
but it wasn't all happiness. My father, Alessandro Bocelli, died just one day before he was to sing for Pope John Paul II in Rome. I didn't know what to do. It was the greatest privilege of my life to be able to sing for the Pope, but my father, whom I adored, had passed away, and I was devastated. My mother, Edith Bocelli, insisted that I fulfill my commitment, and so I did. I sang for Juan Pablo, and the next day I flew back for my father's funeral. Don't think Juan Pablo would not be the only pope or president or king for whom I would sing. The list is endless. Bill Clinton, the Queen of England, Sarkozy, and many more. They say I'm a champ. For me, as a kid born in a small Italian town, that was crazy. And even more, to be successful in the United States. My popularity such that in the year 2000, I performed a massive concert in front of the Statue of Liberty. I took advantage of the occasion to dedicate the song Sogno, Dream, to my father. The following year, I had the sad honor of singing at the memorial for the Twin Towers. I hope that my Ave Maria helped to soothe so much pain. In 2001, I released Cielito Toscana, The Tuscan Sky, where I returned again to the pop style. With this album, I embarked on a new series of concerts from China to Madison Square Garden in New York, stopping to perform a memorable show in the pyramids of Egypt. It would be in 2002 when I recorded an album called Sentimento and sang again with my friend Pavarotti. In that year, I also returned to opera with two great productions, Tosca and Il Trovatore. Unfortunately, my inspiration and my teacher, Franco Corelli, passed away in 2003. But that year would also bring something wonderful into my life. Veronica Berti, who is still my wife today. The truth is that I met her a little by chance. We were both invited to a party that neither of us wanted to go to, but the fact is that we went, we saw each other, and it was love at first sight. Well, you know what I mean. We fell in love immediately. What was not so immediate was the marriage. We waited a little bit, 11 years, until we got married in 2014. Be that as it may, since that party we have not been separated for a single day, and she, apart from being my wife, is my manager. It was a decade of continuous work. In 2004, I released a new pop album under my name, Andrea, which included songs such as La Attesa, Dell'amore non si sa, We Don't Know About Love. Then I would perform my first concert of music by Latin authors, and after that several classical albums with operas such as Massenet Verder, Cavalleria Rusticana, or Pagliacci, culminating again in 2006 with an album where I sing all those songs with which I started my career in the bars of Italy. I called it Amore. I have always tried to perform an average of 40 concerts a year all over the world, and at least one opera in the theater. Of course, to achieve this, I have to keep in shape. To do this, I sing every day for a minimum of 2 hours. It's like going to the gym for me. But that's not all, mind you. On days when I have a concert, or when I'm going to perform an opera, I don't speak all day. Yes, I know, it's a bit boring, but it's the best way to preserve my voice. Another thing I do is to eat for the last time 3 or 4 hours before the performance. Otherwise, it affects my singing. Of course, when I'm done, I'm hungry. I also usually go to the place where I'm performing about 3 hours before and warm up my voice once or twice with the songs I'm going to perform. With all that, I'm ready. But don't think, despite all that, I still get very nervous. Performances are a big responsibility. Singing in front of thousands of people who love music and have come to listen to you is a challenge. But it's not all work in life, is it? Whenever I have a bit of free time, I go back to my house in Tuscany, which is right by the sea, and practice a lot of sports. I love kite surfing, skating, skiing, running, and of course, horseback riding. Who said fear? By the way, another thing I do every year is to go back to my little village, Laiatico. I came up with the idea of creating an outdoor theater and calling it the Theater of Silence. There would be no performances there all year except my own. Cool, isn't it? In the year 2006, my great friend Luciano Pavarotti died. To honor him, I sang him to drink a corpus of Mozart in the Cathedral of Modena. A couple of years later, in my 50s, I felt like honoring those songs of my homeland with which I had grown up, and I released Incanto, an album of classical Italian songs. Also in 2019, I did something I had not yet done in my entire career. An album of Christmas songs. I called it My Christmas. At that time, I was invited to sing at the opening ceremony of the 2010 Shanghai Expo. I decided to sing Nessun Dorma, which had been popularized by my friend Pavarotti. I received lots of compliments, but it didn't end there. The next day, I took part in a concert in the same stadium, in front of 80,000 people. Although I like to sing without amplifiers, that day it was impossible. Normally up to 15,000 people I do it without anything, but beyond that, you can no longer hear well. If you ask me if I have a favorite concert, I would say the one I did in the year 2011 in Central Park, New York. I had recently released my album, Note Illuminata, Illuminated Night, and I had never sung there. It seemed like a good time, so I invited some friends like Celine Dion or Tony Bennett, and it was a very, very special night. Even though it's my favorite concert, to be completely honest with you, I still prefer opera. It's what I listened to when I was little. And also, why not say it? Because I'm also surrounded by more singers, not just me on stage. Something that I have to admit, after so many years of career, I still panic about. Do you know how I try to calm down before a concert? By writing poetry. I know. It's not the most typical thing to do, but it works for me. Imagine how nervous I get that usually my wife, who keeps my daily schedule, doesn't tell me everything I have to do in the coming weeks or months so I don't start thinking about it. Every day when I wake up, she tells me, you have to go here, you have to do this. And me, I follow instructions.
Sir, yes, sir!
It was July of the year, and I thought it was time to give back to the world some of the much it had given me. So that year I created with my wife Veronica the Andrea Bocelli Foundation. We support multiple humanitarian causes, but of course we also try to improve the lives of blind people. And we are developing a very simple device with a camera and a sound emitter to guide blind people on the street. As you know, I've had a lot of success with my duets in the past. So for my album of the year, Passione, I thought I had to do a new one, but this time in Spanish. I called Jennifer Lopez, and we sang together Quizás, Quizás, Quizás. That same year, I did a beautiful concert in Italy, in Portofino, and later, I would release 2 operas, Puccini's Manon Lescaut and Turandot. Although I was already 54 years old, my wife Veronica and I decided to have a son. Well, it was actually a daughter, because in 2012 my little Virginia Bocelli was born. As I've already told you, a couple of years later I would finally marry Veronica, of course, in church. In fact, in 2015, given my deep Catholic faith. When Pope Francis asked me, I could not say no, and I started a new tour to spread the mission of the family according to the Church. That year, 2015, I also published Cinema, album dedicated to movie songs in which I duet with Ariana Grande in the theme E più ti penso, The More I Think of You. And I also sang the main theme of the movie Gladiator. Nelle tue mani, now we are free. Breathtaking, isn't it? At least for me. For the year 2018, coinciding with my 60th birthday, I released the album See Yes, in which there is a very special collaboration, the song Fall on Me, Ven a Me, the first one I sing with my son Andrea Bocelli. He wants to follow in my footsteps and dedicate himself to music, and I am convinced that he will succeed because he is very talented and is training for it. Oh, I forgot. In the album, I made my second collaboration with the biggest idol of my children. No, it's not me, of course, but Ed Sheeran, with whom I had previously sung his hit Perfect Symphony. With this album, and after a long career, for the first time I reached the top of the American Billboard. Despite my 16 pop albums, 11 operas, and 11 classical albums, I still had a lot of energy and a lot of music left. That's why, in 2020, I released a new album called Believe, Creer, which is based on 3 key words for me: faith, hope, and charity. Those 3 words guided me to offer an emotional concert called Music for Hope from the Milan Cathedral during the pandemic to convey a message of hope, which, by the way, has already been seen by more than 33 million people. I have sold more than 90 million records. I have become a Grand Officer of the Order of Merit of the Italian Republic. I hold the world record for having simultaneously reached positions 1, 2, and 3 on the US Classical Album Chart. I have received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and have sung for queens, popes, and celebrities. I know, what I just listed seems almost like a fairy tale. However, it coexists with what I have in my mind, my little vices, my flaws, my frailties, my fears. All the things that make me a completely normal person without any special merit. And woe betide me if I forget all this. I wrote my memoirs at the age of 40, and if God allows me, at the age of 80 I will do it again, because I still have a lot of music of silence in me.
If you want more images, videos, songs, and fun facts about this artist, you will find it all on Trembol.com. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, share it with everyone, and most importantly, join the Trembol family on Patreon, where you will find unique podcasts, special content, and you can also appear in our dedications. You'll find the link in the description. Thank you very much. See you next time, Trembol. We love you.